March 14th, 1997. An explosion rocks the 10th floor of a high-rise in downtown LA, sending 6-inch shards of glass and flaming concrete down towards the streets. On the sidewalks below, panicked civilians flee as first responders struggle to contain the ever-expanding blaze. 40 people will die in the fire that day, some from the flames itself, others from smoke inhalation. Scores more are injured in the incident. These are the numbers reported in the local papers. What they won't report is that 2 of those deaths were agents of the SCP Foundation, and another is a humanoid anomaly. But one of those deaths won't stick. Less than a week later, a junior agent at Site-322 is called into the office of his supervisor. He's spent years training at the Foundation Field Agent Academy, learning everything from anti-mimetic resistance techniques to close combat techniques against creatures with anomalous levels of strength. He's the best of the best of the best, and somehow, he still feels extremely nervous about what his first assignment will entail. When he enters the office, his stern-faced superior is waiting for him. There's no time for chit-chat or dilly-dallying. They've got a matter of great importance to discuss. The supervisor pulls out a file and studies it carefully, nodding, before looking up and saying, "You have an impressive record, Agent. Are you willing to lay down your life for the Foundation?" The agent nods. "Yes, sir." This seems to please the supervisor. "Do you believe that the protection of humanity is the highest ideal, and that you're willing to die in the dark so that they might live in the light?" The agent once again nods. "Yes, sir." "Then I have only one more question before I give you your new assignment," the supervisor says. "Are you caught up on Friends?" And that was when the agent's life changed forever. No, his supervisor wasn't trying to make lighthearted small talk. This was a matter of grave importance, because the agent's new assignment was to ensure the supervision and protection of actor David Schwimmer, who plays the character Ross on the popular sitcom Friends. The agent couldn't help but laugh at this. How ridiculous. He'd signed up to this job to protect humanity, not to play babysitter for some pampered sitcom actor. This must have read on his face, because his supervisor gives him a severe look. "This is one of the more dangerous and volatile anomalies we've discovered in the last few years, son," he says. "You're here because your predecessor is dead. If you want to avoid the same fate, you will listen to me extremely closely." The next day, the agent's mission begins. He's been briefed, though some part of him still feels like this is an elaborate joke on the newbie. He meets with the Friends actor outside one of his homes in New York City and was given instructions to follow him with a simple directive: prevent Mr. Schwimmer from dying by any means necessary. It seemed, from the way that the supervisor described it, that a truly anomalous streak of bad luck was following Schwimmer. A tendency towards life-threatening accidents or attempts at assassination. But how bad could it really be? To begin their itinerary, David wants to take a jaunt to his favorite bakery for a coffee and a bagel. That can't be too demanding, right? Just a walk through Central Park. What could be more innocent? Mr. Schwimmer, who the agent feels is actually extremely down-to-earth despite his friend's fame, locks the door to his apartment and heads out into the street. And that's where the chaos begins in earnest. As David tries to cross the street, the agent notices a runaway car careening towards him. The woman behind the wheel is in a blind panic, laying on the horn for dear life, a brake failure. But as the car rapidly approaches, David Schwimmer stands frozen like a baby deer about to be turned to road pizza in a flash of headlights. The agent can't allow that, not on his watch. How will the world know if Ross and Rachel will really get together if the Schwimmeister is run down in his prime? There'd be no Madagascar trilogy from DreamWorks, or a surprisingly strong dramatic turn in The People vs. O.J. Simpson. Without a second to waste, the agent runs in and tackles Schwimmer off the road in the nick of time as the car goes screeching past. It collides with a lamppost and bursts into a great ball of terrible flame. "That was a great save there, man," Schwimmer says to the agent as he dusts himself off and stands. "I'd hate to burst into a ball of fire like that. Anyway, let's go get that bagel." Shocked by David's emotional resilience after being in such a horrific situation, the agent nods and follows the TV superstar through Central Park. He counts himself lucky that he's been able to perform his duties so far, but there are still many unseen dangers to come. As they walk across the park, it's a bright, sunny, unreasonably warm day. Elderly New Yorkers walk their dogs, kids play with frisbees and jump ropes, young couples have picnics, birds swoop and tweet up above. It doesn't seem like the kind of place where anything all that dangerous can happen, but the agent keeps up his guard, and it's that exact vigilance that will once again save David's life. The agent notices a group of sketchy-looking men standing in a copse of trees not far from where they're walking. The kind of guys who you might look at and say, they only come out at night, but here they are in broad daylight, casting all their menacing glares. And then, like a pack of rabid dogs, they come charging straight towards the agent and David Schwimmer, pulling out switchblades and small clubs.
"It's David Schwimmer!"
The one who seems to be their leader yells.
"I hate that guy! Let's kill him!"
This is much more in the agent's wheelhouse. He stances up and prepares for the onslaught, drawing upon years of combat training at the Field Agent Academy. Lucky for David Schwimmer, the agent has trained for literally this exact scenario, save for it being in service of protecting one of the Stars of Friends. The fight doesn't last for long. The agent is able to non-lethally disarm and beat down each of the attackers in a manner that would make John Wick proud. All the while, David Schwimmer looks on with a kind of detached, almost vacant admiration that only he could master. With the shifty would-be assassins neutralized and the proper authorities called to have them taken away, David Schwimmer can continue his journey to the bagel store. And the agent, he can continue acting out his duty of guarding the highly unlucky fellow. And of course, their troubles aren't over yet. On the way to the store, they pass a construction site where a mishap causes the entire scaffolding on the side of a building to collapse and tumble towards the street, a deadly behemoth of metal, brick, and plywood. Luckily, the agent's reflexes don't fail either of them this time. He notices this other potential source of death tumbling down towards them and grabs David Schwimmer by the shoulders, pulling him out of harm's way. But not everyone is so lucky. There are plenty of random civilians, poor folks in the wrong place at the wrong time, who are crushed flat by the disaster.
"Really makes you appreciate the fragility of life,"
David Schwimmer says forlornly.
"I'm going to enjoy my bagel even more now."
The agent stands up, already exhausted by everything this assignment has entailed. He feels like an idiot for ever doubting his supervisor's grave tone. Who could even have imagined that being assigned as David Schwimmer's personal security detail could be such a perilous affair? Still, he has a job to do, and as long as there's breath in his body, he's going to carry out that job to the best of his ability. Forging onwards, they arrive at David Schwimmer's favorite bagel shop. He's a regular here, and both the staff at the place and the other regulars know him well and respect his privacy. He orders a classic seeded salmon bagel with cream cheese and capers, his usual. As they wait for the bagel to arrive, the agent feels a strange sense of foreboding coming over him. After everything they've been through already, why would the constant threats to David Schwimmer's life just stop? No, he needs to stay on high alert. There's got to be something else, some other source of danger he's not noticing. He eyes each of the other patrons in the store, enjoying their bagels, drinking coffee, typing out bad screenplays about their life in New York into their MacBooks. Could any of them be a threat to the life of David Schwimmer? Could they have murderous intent? But it's not just people, is it? The forces of fate itself conspire to keep the Friends actor down. Could the oven explode in the kitchen and kill David in the blast? Could a bagel chef carelessly drop a knife, which then bounces off the floor and lands directly in the actor's heart? Or would the ceiling fan up above fall like a deadly projectile towards Schwimmer's vulnerable skull? The paranoia of it is almost enough to drive the agent insane. But none of those fearful possibilities come to pass. Instead, a waitress brings David his bagel, which he then begins to eat. And the agent has to admit, it looks like an extremely tasty bagel, and he almost regrets not ordering one for himself.
"Best bagel in New York, seriously,"
Schwimmer says through a mouthful.
"Which is a tall..."
The sentence dies away in his throat. The agent is confused for a moment, until Schwimmer begins to silently gasp. He's choking on his own favorite bagel. How diabolical. How could the agent have not seen this coming? But thankfully, he's prepared for this too. He knows the Heimlich maneuver and uses it with great effect to save David Schwimmer from a particularly frightening death at the hands of his bagel. Taking in a gasp of fresh air, his throat cleared, David is more relieved than he's ever felt before. But before he can thank the agent for saving his life, well, he bursts into flames. The agent stands there, jaw slack with horror and confusion, as he looks down at the burning wreckage that was once Friends star David Schwimmer. Spontaneous human combustion. It had happened so fast. How could he possibly have seen this coming? Not only would this tragically mean that there wouldn't be any more seasons of Friends, it also seemed equally likely that this would mean the end of the agent's career at the SCP Foundation. Imagine all the resources it would take to cover up the death of beloved actor David Schwimmer. Just as the agent is slipping into new layers of despair around his rapidly collapsing career, he turns toward the window to see the crowd of curious rubberneckers forming outside, considering how much amnestics would be needed to dose them all. But as his eyes pass over each member of the crowd, he notices something impossible. Standing among them is David Schwimmer himself, with a distant, haunted look in his eye. And at that, the agent faints. No one ever told David Schwimmer that life would be this way. Thankfully, when it comes to providing an explanation for what you've just witnessed, I'll be there for you. Because this isn't just the feverish imagination of a paranoid Friends superfan, it's SCP-7590, codenamed David Schwimmer Died Again, for obvious reasons. This recurrent and extremely dangerous anomalous phenomenon has plagued the American actor, comedian, and producer since the premiere of his iconic mid-90s and early 2000s sitcom. To put it simply, Mr. Schwimmer keeps dying and then resurrecting, only to die again. The anomaly causes bizarre accidents to happen to David Schwimmer while simply going about his business. If he somehow manages to survive all this Final Destination madness, he'll then die by spontaneous human combustion. Foundation efforts have so far failed to prevent this from happening, and between 1 and 7 days after his death, he'll appear, alive again, in one of his 4 properties across the United States, retaining some knowledge of the horrible things that had happened to him. This would be bad enough for Schwimmer's own health and happiness, but the accidents that befall him often have large amounts of collateral damage, including high casualty events. That, plus the fact that Schwimmer is famous and thus invites scrutiny from both the media and his legions of devoted fans, make SCP-7590 a serious threat to the Veil, and one that needs considerable Foundation resources to keep under wraps. After poring through the files related to this extremely peculiar anomaly and revisiting my friend's box sets, I was able to discover a number of case studies related to the case, going all the way back to 1994, when the first season of Friends aired. Schwimmer was walking through New York City, trying to location scout the Central Park coffee shop that would be one of the major locations in the series. However, during the location scouting session, Schwimmer underwent spontaneous human combustion, bursting into flames and killing the producer next to him in the process. The entire area needed to be evacuated as the rampant Schwimmer flames spread. This news quickly reached the media, and conversations were had about whether to cancel the show and dedicate the remaining episodes to Schwimmer or try to recast Ross. It was a freak tragedy, but stranger things had happened. Until Schwimmer walked onto the set of Friends during Season 2 discussions, scaring the living hell out of everyone involved. Had David Schwimmer come back from the dead? Thankfully, before this startling news could reach the media, Foundation agents embedded in the LAPD intercepted the news and were able to perform a mix of mass amnestic treatment and a sophisticated disinformation campaign. As a result, people believed that the earlier reports of Schwimmer's death were just a hoax, an outlandish conspiracy theory. Everything seemed handled. But of course, the Foundation had no idea that they were now involved in SCP-7590 for the long haul. As you saw in our opening case study, Schwimmer kept on dying again and again and again, with the next case file that I was able to obtain taking place years later in 2001. Schwimmer was in an upscale New York City hotel, taking a swim in the hotel swimming pool, when his swimming trunks became stuck on the rubber stopper of the stepladder heading out of the pool. He was trapped under the surface of the water, where he began to drown. Thankfully, by now, the Foundation had gotten used to the eternal misfortune that seemed to befall Mr. Schwimmer. 2 Foundation operatives had been inserted into David's life as bodyguards, who saw that he was in trouble and rushed in to save him. The crisis was averted by the quick work of the agents, but Schwimmer's latest death wasn't stopped, just delayed. He burst into flames sometime later, causing the entire hotel to burn down and resulting in several other deaths. This would have been hard to cover up if it had happened any other day, but this incident happened early in the morning on September 11th, meaning it coincided with the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and thus was blotted out in the media. The Foundation was able to portray the incident as a gas leak, and David Schwimmer returned to life not long after. In 2002, Schwimmer was location scouting again, something I think we should just try to stop him from doing at this point, where he found himself on a farm. There, the farm cat scratched him, creating a wound on his lower lip that at first seemed relatively minor, but was sadly anything but. The wound soon became infected, and Schwimmer was airlifted to a nearby hospital for antibiotic treatment, but he didn't seem to respond to it. Schwimmer's health rapidly deteriorated from the infection as he lay, sweaty and twitching, in his hospital bed before he passed away from spontaneous human combustion. The flames quickly spread across the hospital, where the large number of oxygen tanks and other flammable materials simply fed the blaze. Over 70 people were killed, and over 200 people were injured. This was once again attributed to an unfortunate gas leak, and anyone who knew too much was given a dose of amnestics. But of course, the nightmares here were far from over, both for Mr. Schwimmer and anyone unfortunate enough to be around him. Following the finale of Friends, the SCP Foundation did a cost-benefit analysis and decided that it was time to permanently contain David Schwimmer for his own protection. At Site-322, the Foundation could take good care of him, and a rumor was disseminated on the outside that he was retiring to a private island to get away from it all. In actual fact, he was in a secure containment unit. But sadly, anomalous bad luck can follow you, even back into the Foundation's care. The Chaos Insurgency, an SCP Foundation group of interest known for performing daring raids on Foundation containment sites, made an alliance with 3 other hostile groups of interest for an unprecedented joint attack on Site-322. They used an electromagnetic pulse weapon to partially disable the security system of the site, accidentally unlocking Schwimmer's containment unit in the process. He attempted an escape during the chaos as invaders and Foundation guards fought to the death for control of the site. Schwimmer was able to steal the uniform of one of the Chaos Insurgency dead and attempted to escape the site in disguise. His acting abilities almost did him in there, because he soon found himself surrounded by 40 Foundation guards. Thankfully, one of them recognized that it was Schwimmer before they could open fire. He was instead escorted safely back to his cell once the invasion had been thwarted, where he died of spontaneous human combustion later that night. Because Schwimmer had proven to be too much of a liability to himself and others to ever live life as a normal man, the Foundation decided instead to invest in a body double. The doppelganger David would live the real man's life while they kept him in containment. Thus far, this has proven to be the most effective method of containment for Schwimmer, because the body double has, thankfully, never succumbed to the same effect. However, it wasn't enough to simply lock Schwimmer up and call it a day. The researchers on his case were thinking a little bigger. After all, they had a Chaos Insurgency raid to avenge, and they had an extremely creative idea of how exactly to do it. Schwimmer was placed into a highly flammable coffin and taken by a Foundation helicopter to the Chaos Insurgency stronghold. The coffin and Schwimmer were used as a kind of anomalous missile, causing the stronghold to set on fire as Schwimmer spontaneously combusted. Over 300 insurgents were killed in the process, and upwards of 600 were injured. In light of the tremendous success of this mission, the SCP Foundation amended the containment class of SCP-7590 to THAUMIEL, a rare class for anomalies that can be used in the containment of other anomalies. David Schwimmer is a living weapon for the SCP Foundation, a bomb that will always return to one of his 4 homes across the United States, where Foundation agents are always waiting to detain him. And isn't that just such a Ross move when you really think about it? Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-5362, the one with 1,000 faces, which is not, by the way, an episode of Friends.